This unthinkable act now shocking the world, an assassination attempt on former President Donald Trump. At a campaign rally filled with Secret Service and security, how did things go so wrong?
Clearly, what happened on Saturday in Pennsylvania was a failure. This was about as close a call you're going to get for a presidential candidate as you'll ever see.
Could the shooting have been prevented altogether?
I'm standing there pointing at him for 2-3 minutes. Secret Service is looking at us from the top of the barn. I'm pointing at that roof, just standing there like this. And next thing you know, 5 shots ring out.
Why wasn't the shooting area being guarded by the Secret Service?
They clearly identified it as a threat. Yet, mysteriously, they chose to put it outside the Secret Service perimeter of responsibility.
And what does this mean for upcoming campaign stops and the future of the presidency?
What I'm looking for then is change with regard to the Secret Service.
It was set to be former President Donald Trump's last campaign stop before this week's Republican National Convention. Just after 6 o'clock Saturday night, Trump took the stage in Butler, Pennsylvania, about an hour north of Pittsburgh. But less than 10 minutes later, gunshots rang out. A bullet grazed former President Trump's right ear in the shooting. In a post made on Truth Social, he wrote in part, quote, "I was shot with a bullet that pierced the upper part of my right ear. I knew immediately that something was wrong and that I heard a whizzing sound, shots, and immediately felt the bullet ripping through my skin. Much bleeding took place, so I realized then what was happening." He was evacuated from the rally and taken to Butler Memorial Hospital for evaluation. During the shooting, 2 other men in the crowd were also injured. We're now told they're both in stable condition. However, another person, Corey Competore, died as a result of his injuries. Only seconds after shots first rang out, Secret Service shot and killed the would-be assassin.
Are we good? Shooters down. Are we good to move? We're clear. We're clear.
Investigators later identified the shooter as 20-year-old Thomas Matthew Crooks from the Pittsburgh suburb of Bethel Park, Pennsylvania. Officials say he fired the shots from a rooftop overlooking the rally that we've since learned was previously used for a law enforcement staging area. From here, federal agents are working to understand Crooks's motive by searching his home, computer, cell phone, and any other data he may have left behind. But in the moments leading up to the shooting, there were warning signs that something was off.
And look what happened to our country. Probably 20 million people. And that's a little bit.
He's going to
Just moments before shots were fired in that video, you can hear someone yelling, pointing to someone on the roof. That person wasn't the only one who apparently alerted the authorities.
We're pointing at the guy crawling up the roof.
And he had a gun, right?
He had a rifle.
A rifle.
We could clearly see him with a rifle. Absolutely.
Spectator cell phone video seemingly captures this, apparently showing Crooks crawling along the roof of a nearby building. Some say their warnings about the shooter were ignored.
I'm standing there pointing at him for 2-3 minutes. Secret Service is looking at us from the top of the barn. I'm pointing at that roof, just standing there like this. And next thing you know, 5 shots ring out.
So you're certain that the shots came from that guy on the roof?
100%.
To come to terms with what went wrong, we spoke to Frank Figliuzzi, author of Long Haul, Hunting the Highway Serial Killers, and the former assistant director for counterintelligence with the FBI. This is the first assassination attempt in decades that we've seen on a former president running again for president. To you, is this a failure that there was even a shooting at all?
The Secret Service's own language on their own website describes their mission as zero fail. Clearly, what happened on Saturday in Pennsylvania was a failure. And I don't think you'll find a credible Secret Service agent that will try to talk you out of that sad reality. This was a failure. And ultimately, whether we learn that really the police were supposed to cover that building and or that roof, the buck stops on the desk of the Secret Service. It was their security plan. It's their responsibility. They'll need to step up and say that.
Figliuzzi straight up calls the shooting a failure on the part of the Secret Service, but says there are several things that could have contributed to the oversights. So what went wrong here? I mean, it seems like it could have been a domino effect, one thing after another, but to me, there were some pretty big glaring errors. How did this even happen?
Yeah, I actually just dropped a column for MSNBC Daily online where I write a regular column, and it digs deeply into the potential scenarios that led to this fatality. Let's please not forget that while it was a near miss for former President Trump, it was a fatal shot for a spectator, and 2 other spectators now are in the hospital. So this was about as close a call you're going to get for a presidential candidate as you'll ever see.
In his column, Figliuzzi writes, "The Secret Service failed Saturday. America deserves to know why."
What do I say in my column? I look at potential scenarios. One, this is not conjecture. It's largely based on what we've already known and reported, which is the Secret Service was well aware of this building and the potential risk it posed. That's coming from multiple sources at Secret Service to multiple media outlets. The distance from the building to the podium, based on the elevated nature of this building, which gives the high ground to a potential bad guy, they clearly identified it as a threat. Yet, mysteriously, they chose to put it outside the Secret Service perimeter of responsibility. Now, that means likely that it was delegated to state or local police to cover, and that there had to be some level of detail about what cover means. Are you going to post officers on the ground and simply prevent people from getting into the building? That's nice. Are you also going to put someone on the roof or have eyes on that roof? Because again, it's not the Secret Service perimeter, so it's yours. And that had to be clearly communicated.
Figliuzzi says there was major oversight in one extremely important area.
So what's happened here? A failure to communicate, almost guaranteed. Finger pointing, I thought you had it. No, I thought you had it. There's another scenario that I've seen and don't like at all, because in my FBI experience, it leads to catastrophe. And that's the possibility of mixed responsibilities. Hey, our Secret Service snipers and police snipers will cover that roof. We've got the roof. What you need to do, police department, is cover the ground so that no one is ever going to get in that building. You've locked it down. You've talked to the owner. You've got the locks and keys. Well, what are we hearing? The owner of that building is saying, no one ever talked to me, not before, during the advance for the rally, and not after the shooting. So we have a serious breakdown here.
According to Figliuzzi, communication wasn't the only oversight. In fact, it was the area of the rally that the Secret Service knowingly didn't cover. We spoke about the jurisdiction, so to speak, whether it was the local authorities' responsibility or the Secret Service to kind of guard or keep an eye on that area. And some of the reports I've seen say the shooter was only 500 feet away. So how did they make that determination that it should be the local authorities covering that area? Because I'm assuming they're not trained in the same way as the Secret Service.
You are assuming correct, and that's a hard question, because you really can't have your this both ways. You can't say, oh yes, during the advance we recognized this building as a threat, and by the way, it's outside our perimeter and we gave it to the police. Now, we haven't, I want to be careful. We have not heard that line per se from the Secret Service. In fact, they've been incredibly closed mouth here. They haven't stepped up and said, we own this. We're always responsible no matter what. They've just hunkered down and said nothing. But yeah, it's inconsistent to say high ground, threat, well within a rifle range, and comma, yeah, we gave it to somebody else. Very, very inconsistent. They never give up the high ground. They certainly measure. They know the counter sniper team for Secret Service comes in on an advance. They do a measurement. Hey, that building's 150 yards away. That's an easy shot, even for a rookie with a rifle. We've got to cover it. And then, oh, let's give it to the locals. Something's inconsistent there.
So Figliuzzi says not only were there inconsistencies, but potential security measures that were overlooked, like the simple step of checking and double checking when it comes to backup.
The other thing that happens throughout an event like this, and I've been on many of them, is you do constant periodic check-ins with your hosts. What does that sound like? You get on the radio, or I've seen people physically go around. That's a great practice. Hey, post number 1, you got the building, right? You awake? You okay? Have you been shot, abducted? You eating a sandwich? All good on post 1? Get the feedback. Yeah, all good, post 1. That's like 101 of special event posts. So what happened here? Did that happen? Did somebody get on the radio and say, hey, hi building, you good on post 1? No answer? Did the police go, yeah, we're good. We're eating sandwiches? I don't understand. But I will tell you this, the Secret Service model is based on multiple redundancies and layers of security so that if one fails, they've got backup, right? Everything failed. So I don't get it.
Security measures aside, there is some concern that federal and local authorities dismissed the warning signs brought up by witnesses at the rally.
And look what happened to our country. Probably 20 million people. And you know, that's a little bit...
He's going down!
He was up there for a couple of minutes.
He was up
you
there.
You saw him up there for a couple of minutes.
Absolutely. At least 3 to 4 minutes.
And you were telling the police and the Secret Service.
We were telling the police. We were pointing at them for the Secret Service, who were looking at us from the top of the barn. They were looking at us the whole time when we were standing by that tree.
Could they see
binoculars?
Could they see him?
Probably not, because the roof, the way the slope went, he was behind where they could see.
Now, I know one of the big questions on everyone's mind, there are many that are unanswered, but what people are really clamoring toward is why may the Secret Service or any local officials there have ignored some of the warnings? I mean, we've seen the video of people saying, hey, there's someone up on the roof over there. Why might these warnings, so to speak, have been ignored?
Well, it's not, I see it as not, I'm with you. I see it as not so much ignored with regard to the spectators pointing and shouting to the police, but rather a dropped ball and confusion. What the spectators are describing is officers kind of looking at them saying, what are you talking about? What roof? What do you see? We don't see it. And what that means is the officers were not getting on their radio, right? They're not, get on the radio. We have witnesses saying something's up on the roof. Constant communication. So will this investigation find that they weren't on the same frequency as Secret Service? That's a huge problem. I've seen this happen. It's a huge problem because the Secret Service guards their frequency very carefully, and they use an encrypted federal frequency. So they might give one walkie-talkie to one officer in one department and say, you're the keeper of the federal radio. This gets very odd. The Secret Service may have a police radio that's unencrypted, so they can hear police traffic. But what this gets back to, Sierra, is something we already talked about: confusion and misunderstanding about who was responsible for what, right? So if the police are like, yeah, what roof? That's a sign to me that they didn't know they were responsible for the roof, right? If they were. We have reports now, multiple reports, that an officer went up a ladder or climbed up to the roof because of the spectators' concerns, took a look at the shooter looked at him, officer reportedly went back down the ladder. Okay, so, did that officer get on the radio and give an emergency signal? I have contact. Typically it's contact, shooter. I don't know. And because this is important to find out, because if that officer had said, shooter on roof, I have contact, which means I have an armed person, that Secret Service sniper or other sniper could have taken that guy out in a millisecond, and shots never would have been fired at former President Trump.
Now, we're still working to learn more about the shooter. Obviously, it's only been a couple of days since the incident, but we do know he's a 20-year-old person. I mean, to me, that's almost a kid. He can't even legally drink. So it's not in the way that he's this mastermind assassin who's been trained for years. To me, it almost seems like he slipped through the radar.
Well, yeah, I mean, there isn't even any radar. He doesn't exist. He has virtually no social media, if any at all. The FBI. I was on a call this weekend for the media with the Department of Justice and FBI and Attorney General and the director, and they told us some interesting things. One of the things they said of interest was that they're almost solely focused on the shooter's phone right now. So that tells me that, yeah, the computer signature is not there, social media is not there. It's all about his phone. And when they say they're focused on the phone, trying to gain access to the phone, what's that mean to us? It's encrypted. There's a password they can't break right now. That's what I took away from this. That's not their words, but my words. When they tell me they're focused on the phone, they're trying to access the phone. So look for, let's pay attention to what they find in that phone.
Officials have already begun the search of Crooks's home and personal information, and Figliuzzi expects even more details to come out in the coming weeks.
By the way, there'll be a complete overlay, usually computer-assisted graphics. You'll see a really state-of-the-art, minute-by-minute creation of what he ate for breakfast that morning, how he traveled. They'll use this from cell phone tracking, right? From any highway tolls, any cameras in the area. They will have a story to tell visually and audibly from his breakfast that morning all the way to the shooting. And they'll gather every witness's cell phone. They'll gather the media coverage footage. They'll gather the Secret Service radio traffic, the police radio traffic. All of that will be melded together to give us an actual step-by-step account of what happened and when.
While investigators are still searching for a motive to the crime itself, there's still the lingering question of how the gunman was able to pull the trigger at all.
The larger question, Sarah, is why? Okay, so why? Yeah, we all agree there's a breakdown. Why? I predict we're going to continue to hear that the Secret Service is stretched way beyond capacity right now. I believe this has been the case for a long time. We've been hearing this back through the Trump administration. He has a large family. They're covering all his family members. The Secret Service is protecting Anthony Fauci at the Centers for Disease Control because of death threats. They're protecting everybody, and it's too many. And by the way, they still investigate counterfeit currency, bad checks, internet fraud, financial crimes. When they can squeeze in the president, they get that done too. We've got to look hard at resources and responsibilities for the Secret Service. They're over delegating to police at all of these rallies, and really exacerbated, I think, this weekend. Why? Because where is a high percentage of the Secret Service right now? Milwaukee, Wisconsin, preparing for the RNC. I think that caused an even greater reliance on local police.
Meanwhile, that major political event is already underway in Wisconsin. So we're talking about the Republican National Convention. This has been planned for months, quite some time, and it was only about 48 hours after this incident in Pennsylvania. So one would think that there would be more security measures in place there, but it doesn't sound like that's the case.
You and I would think that there'd be some alteration or reconsideration of security for the RNC. But the press conference the Secret Service held over the weekend said, no, they're not changing anything with regard to their security posture. So look, I'm taken aback by that. I'll tell you why. The good news is that this event has been designated what's called a National Security Special Event, an NSSE. That's what we do for the Super Bowl. I believe it's done for like July 4th fireworks on the Mall in Washington. It's a big deal. It means that all of the tools in the federal toolkit are available. Some are classified. So all of that's great that's going to be overlaying this. The Secret Service is awesome with regard to an indoor event and locking down a venue. I have no concerns about what goes on inside that venue. I have worked political conventions, and the Secret Service is awesome inside the venue. It's outside the venue that we should be concerned about.
Figliuzzi points to some concerns with Wisconsin state laws that could pose a challenge in terms of security.
There are a couple of designated free speech zones. Those are your protest areas. People have to apply to get in there and speak. And there's also a designated parade route if people want to protest in the form of an official parade around the building. Those areas are part of what's called a soft security zone. It's not the hard zone as you get right into the building entrance, but it's a soft zone. What does that mean? Secret Service is going to be checking you. They'll make sure you've got you're on the list to come protest. They will wand you with a magnetometer for a weapon. But guess what? In the state of Wisconsin, the law says you can never tell someone they can't carry a weapon, even in a soft security zone. So we're going to have this kind of surreal experience where people probably will show up armed, and that has to be permitted per Wisconsin law. And yes, the Secret Service will take note that the lady in the blue top has a weapon, but that doesn't mean they're going to kick you out because of the weapon. So I find that really tough to deal with and an even greater challenge. And quite frankly, I don't know why the federal government isn't insisting that the state of Wisconsin temporarily suspend that law for a couple of days.
Whether that change is made remains to be seen, and so does the idea of overall change for the future. What can we learn from this? I know a lot of people are trying to come up with answers or solutions, but will this change the future of the campaign or any sort of presidential security?
Well, look, this serves to confirm what we already knew. The threat level is high. The FBI director has been screaming it from the rooftop for months now. Every time he testifies on the Hill, he says he's concerned about the threat level. He says it's the highest for any time he's ever been in law enforcement. What I'm looking for then is change with regard to the Secret Service. I think it's quite necessary that this investigation ferret out whether there truly is a resource problem. You know, the Secret Service is very, very secret. It's their first name. They won't come out and say, possibly for national security reasons, we can't do this. We're too thin, right? That signals to the adversary, hey, wow, this is a good time to attack. So they don't say that. But I'm telling you, they are too thin. If you're over relying on police departments, and think about it, there's a rally in a different town every weekend with Trump. You're going to a different police department with different personnel who have varying levels of expertise and talent. They may never have done a rally like this before, and you're giving them way too much responsibility. The Secret Service has to own that. They have to own it. It's their site. It's their event. Also, what I don't hear a lot of people talking about, Sierra, is we all think of the Secret Service and the suits and ties protecting a president. We forget that they have a ton of other investigative duties. They used to be a Treasury Department agency before DHS was created. So you know what they're still investigating? Counterfeit money, financial crimes, bad checks, internet fraud, child pornography, mortgage fraud. Why? Why do we do that to them when their most important mission is protecting the brand and reputation of the United States?
From here, there will be an independent investigation into the shooting.
Joe Biden, during his national press conference, President Biden said, I am ordering an independent investigation. Now, I don't know what independent investigation means. I don't know if he means the Department of Homeland Security Inspector General. Remember, Secret Service fits under the DHS, not the Department of Justice. So would that be independent? Would Washington be happy with that? DHS has taken some big hits, you know, about migrants and the southern border. Congress actually tried to recently impeach the secretary of DHS, Mayorkas. So is it going to be acceptable to have DHS investigating their own agency? I mean that he's going to pick people from outside the government currently to do this investigation. And by the way, I think that's a good idea.
Following the shooting, security experts have reassessed President Biden's upcoming trip to Las Vegas. This as former President Donald Trump calls for Secret Service protection for Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Reporting for Law&Crime, I'm Sierra Gillespie.